who have money tend to have more access to resources to be able to use in their defense versus people that don't have money. So you see a lot of, lower and that's really a class issue, and race does come into play.
This is Let Your Voice Be Heard right here on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. Good morning and welcome to Let Your Voice Be Heard right here on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem.
Good morning.
Morning. Happy
Good morning.
Sunday. Hold on, Ed. We got an intro for you before you just put on the radio voice. Okay, guys, so if you're watching us via Facebook Live, shout out to you guys. Of course, this is Let Your Voice Be Heard, where we talk politics, social issues, foreign policy, pop culture, a lot of Beyonce and a lot of Trump, reluctantly, but we still do that here every Sunday right here on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. My name is Selena Hill, and you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Miss Selena Hill. And that might be temporary, as I told you guys and Jackie last week. I'm really thinking about dropping the Miss part, even though it's like such a signature part of my brand. Like, literally, people always refer to me as Miss Hill, and I'm like, I don't know, I might just drop it. So
I don't know. Sometimes I think when you got a good thing, you got to stick with it.
Think so?
I don't know. Why are you dropping it? You meet somebody? Is something you ain't telling us?
No, that's not the reason, Ilyssa. I'm not changing the MS to MRS, FYI.
All right, good. I mean, look, sometimes things just happen and life comes at you fast, and then I just, I miss 2 shows, and then you get married or something.
Right, yeah, like Cardi B and Offset, who have apparently been married since September, so...
But anyways, that's probably a good time for me to tell you who I am. I'm Ilyssa Fuchs. I am your political and legal correspondent. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/Ilyssa Fuchs. That's ILYSSAFUCHS. Not a K, just in case you were wondering. Also on Twitter at Ilyssa Fuchs, on Instagram, Ilyssa.Fuchs, or you can leave a comment on the Politically Preposterous Facebook page, which is facebook.com/politically preposterous. And of course, you can always leave a comment on our live stream where we are broadcasting this show, facebook.com/Let Your Voice Be Heard. And if for some reason that stops working, click over to the Ustream link, which you can also find listed on our Facebook page on Let Your Voice Be Heard Radio Facebook. So that is a lot of different ways in which you can find us. And we have a special guest with us in studio today. So I'm going to pass the mic along to him so that he can tell us who he is.
Well, I will tell everyone.
Selena could jump in right here.
So we have Ed Stokes. He is a born and raised New Yorker. He has been producing media and content in New York City for the past decade for a variety of platforms, including the Left Forum and MSG Radio. In his free time, he enjoys reading, and get this, Ilyssa, Popeyes. I know you two are both have affinities for Popeyes.
Yes, Popeyes.
Not me, please.
My favorite one is this one right
already.
Here. On 135.
That's a good one.
It is a good one. Every time I go there, it's like I get this. There's like always some kind of show going on. So I like it because it's like there's like some guy comes in playing music, or sometimes there's a fight. Sometimes there's a drug deal.
Yeah.
You never know what you're going to get.
The entertainment value and the nutritional value.
It's very good. I'm a big fan of the Popeyes. I hear it's different in Louisiana and it's better. And every time I go to Louisiana, I eat like a ton of fried chicken. I never get Popeyes because I'm like, why am I going to get Popeyes? I could get that up where I'm from. But everybody keeps telling me that I got to eat Popeyes in New Orleans. So
I was down there a couple of years ago, and I went through the same thing. I said, why eat this while you're here? But you have to. It's the staple. And then I found out through some background research that, in fact, that Popeyes is owned by a Chinese company. Yeah.
Wow,
Not
really?
surprised.
Yeah.
China's taking over. Look at that. Everything is made in China,
So
including the
oh
my
Popeyes
God.
chicken.
Our beloved Popeyes.
Next thing you know, Selena's going to yell, "Make America Great Again" into the mic.
No, guys, no. I'm sorry for that. But,
Impeach Trump.
yeah.
Make America Great Again.
Yeah, impeach Trump. Welcome to the show.
Yeah.
Ed,
Thank you for extending an invitation to me. We're in the voice of Harlem. So.
Yes, and he came all the way from Brooklyn.
I did come from Brooklyn, but it was worth it. Yeah, absolutely.
And FYI, Ed and I actually work together
Full disclosure.
Yep,
yes.
full disclosure at Black Enterprise. So
Yep.
glad you made it here, guys. So yeah, we have a great show lined up. We're going to be talking about all the defeats that we've taken on the left this week. I mean, we had Justice Anthony Kennedy, who announced his retirement, and we'll talk about that. On the other hand, we also had a lot of good things that happened, like during the primary results.
You know, you want to hear my favorite thing this week?
Yes.
And I know we're going to talk more news when we get into the nose roundup, but my favorite thing this week is Maxine Waters saying, if you're going to shoot, you better shoot straight because
Right.
there's nothing like a wounded animal.
Right.
Oh, yes. Right. Okay, so now I remember what I was about to say. The Muslim ban, guys. So the Supreme Court actually ruled in favor of Trump's Muslim ban. So, we need to talk about that. And then unions took a major blow as well this week. So, yes, a lot of defeats on the left. But then again, we had the primary election, which actually was very, very surprising. And we're going to talk about what that actually means for the Democratic Party and for us as left-leaning voters. Like, I know a lot of us have left the party, Ed being one of those people who is a registered independent and, you know, doesn't really feel too attached to the party. But maybe this is a shift. Like, we saw the win of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And it's like a lot of people are feeling hopeful again. So, and you know, it's not just her. There are a lot of progressive candidates who are black and brown, who are queer, who are women. Like a lot of things are going on in the national landscape when it comes to progressive politics. So it might be some hope there for us. So hopefully we can get Ed to register a Democrat again.
That's probably not going to happen,
Not
but
gonna happen.
I'll entertain the conversation.
I mean, we can get more into this when we talk about the conversation, but the biggest thing for me is like at least in New York, we don't have open primaries. So if you're
Right.
not registered as a Democrat, then you don't have a say in choosing who the person is in the primary, and that means that you could end up with an establishment candidate, even though somebody like, you know, Ocasio-Cortez is running because somebody like you is not registered to be able to vote for her. So I'm just putting
Right.
that out there.
Right, absolutely.
Anyways, I think we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we have a lot of really good stuff coming at you. We'll talk about all this depressing news and some of the more positive things that have happened this week.
Absolutely.
Make sure you give us a call at 212-650-6903 if you have a comment, or tweet us at @BHeard_radio. And on that note, I'm going to throw it back to Selena, who's going to take us out.
Absolutely. So again, guys, this is Let Your Voice Be Heard. Keep those comments coming on Facebook. We appreciate you guys. And don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Got my coins like Mario. Yeah, they call me Cardi B. I run this like cardio. I'm in district in the chain.
And we are back. This is Let Your Voice Be Heard right here on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. And of course, we want you to let your voices be heard. So that means you should call us up at
212-650-6903.
You should also tweet us at BeHeard
_radio
and keep those comments flowing
at Facebook.com/Let Your Voice Be Heard.
This is tight. You guys have a little thing going on.
We got it going on today.
Seriously.
We got the swirl thing going on.
Right.
No, seriously, that's all it is. So yeah, so shout out to like Jackie and Stanley. Half of our regular crew are not here. They're watching us via Facebook apparently.
Tight.
Thanks,
So,
losers. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, but you know we have Ed Stokes who is filling in for both Jackie and Stanley.
Those are big shoes, it seems, that I'm filling in. I'm
Pretty big.
I'm a temporary voice.
No, but we
we're
appreciate
here.
you. We
Absolutely.
appreciate you. So shout out to you, Ed. Again, you're a Democratic Socialist, and again, you work in media, and we appreciate you having you here.
Let's jump into it.
Absolutely. So as we mentioned right before we went on break, Justice Anthony Kennedy has announced he is retiring. I think that he's officially leaving like July 31st. And the reason why this is such a big deal is because he was that crucial swing vote on the Supreme Court. So you have 4 justices who are extremely conservative, and then you have 4 who are more progressive and tend to lean left. And Anthony Kennedy, he was that vote who would, even though he's like Republican and conservative, he voted in favor of abortion rights and LGBTQ rights, same-sex marriage. So he was very critical because he didn't let his politics get into like making the right decision. And now he's like,
Generally.
Right, generally speaking, you know, a lot of times when it came to those big votes, a lot of times he was clutch. And now he's leaving, and, you know, it's a lot to be said about that. Like Ilyssa, I remember when that news broke, you like text us an emoji like heartbreak or something. Like you were like very distraught.
Well, because here's the thing. It's like Justice Kennedy does occupy that middle space, and Justice Kennedy, because of that, has been a bulwark against the repeal of Roe versus Wade, and basically putting forth. He wrote the decision Obergefell versus Hodges, which is the case that legalized gay marriage. He was also the very influential in other decisions, or making sure that Planned Parenthood versus Casey and Roe versus Wade wasn't overturned, which is sort of where I started. And so, obviously, he had bad decisions, too, on a lot of economic things and, antitrust matters and corporate matters. He would rule in favor of big corporations and sort of rule more in favor with, his Republican conservative roots. But when it came to social issues, he very much was sort of fell more towards the left with the liberal justices. And now you have Justice Roberts, who is like a center-right justice, who now is going to be occupying the middle. And what's even more scary than that is the idea that if Donald Trump wins re-election in 2020, he's probably going to get to appoint at least 2, potentially 3 additional Supreme Court justices, depending on who retires and or dies, hopefully not. And that literally could mean that you have 5 super conservative justices to 2 liberal justices, Elena Kagan and Sonia Sotomayor, who are recent appointees. That changes the landscape, not just for now, but for decades. The next 100 years. Decades. And so we can talk again more about this during the next segment, but this is why people have to go out and vote. And sometimes it means you have to vote for the lesser of 2 evils. And I get it. It also means the Democrats have to put forth better candidates, but we can't take this next elections for granted. They did studies on the 2016 election showing that Republicans turned out to vote for Trump because of the Supreme Court, whereas liberals did not.
Well,
so,
Ed, I want to get your take on Justice Kennedy and why this is so significant.
Well, I think to sort of piggyback on what some of Ilyssa was saying, sure, on the national sort of the economic front, he got a lot of things wrong, but on the issues that matter on an everyday level, as far as women reproductive rights and sort of just social issues that we deem, that should be second nature, so things we shouldn't even really be having basic conversations about. He was a champion of those, and as she also pointed out, he also kept sort of this fascist side of the right wing of the Supreme Court in check. Now, of course, with and I think this is very interesting because when Obama tried behind the scenes, and of course we're going to talk more about this, but when you mentioned he was pushed into Kennedy was pushed into retirement, Obama did the same thing behind the scenes and tried to get Ginsburg and a few others to step down for this same exact reason, is so that you can shape the courts how you feel like they should be shaped for the next decade or two. So this whole idea of pushing people to the side is more about as politics. It's a long game, and it's at this point it's very dangerous that Trump has the option. Well, he may have the opportunity to get 3 of his guys or girls on the seat.
Ilyssa, earlier you mentioned that he was forced into retirement, and like Ed just said, is it like a force, or are they just pushing people?
That's unclear right now. There's this is still news coming out. There was some news reported about how Anthony Kennedy's son apparently works for Deutsche Bank and gave a very big loan to Donald Trump. And so there's maybe some more, maybe it's just coincidence, but it seems like something a little bit more nefarious is potentially going on. Well,
I would say it's not like we're pulling this out of thin air. What you do is you stock the lower courts with people who have been desk clerks for people like Kennedy or Scalia or anything like that. So more or less you keep their legacy preserved, and you entice them into into retirement by saying, listen, we've stacked the lower courts with all of your minions, people who have come under your wing. So guess what? Your legacy is intact, and you're going to be preserved for decades and generations to come. So this is how you get these people into retirement.
It's like if Kennedy believes that, I don't know. I got a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you because I can't see his legacy staying intact with the people that Donald Trump's potentially going to appoint. But speaking of Supreme Court cases, yes. We had a bad one, 2 bad ones this week. One, you mentioned the Muslim ban case, which came down this week. They essentially ruled that because the law was, quote unquote, facially neutral and that it didn't specifically single out Muslims and that there was non-Muslim countries such as North Korea included, that it was a legal exercise of the president's executive power. It may go down in history as a decision as bad as the Korematsu decision, which, interestingly enough, they actually overruled for the first time ever formally in the Muslim ban decision, which was sort of like a weird smack in the face. And then you also had the Janice case, which was decided this week.
Right, before we get to the Janice
Well,
case.
I was just going to preview them both, and then we could talk about them, just because.
Okay.
I was going to say, then you also had the Janice case decided this week, where essentially they said that if you don't want to pay to be part of a union, a public union, you don't have to, which potentially means that unions could see a lot of their membership decline. Anyways, discuss.
Yeah, okay, moderator. So no, I kind of wanted to scale it back, Ed, to get your take on like just that the Muslim ban. Like, were you surprised at all that the Supreme Court ruled in favor?
I wasn't surprised. I think initially when it was first signed as a executive order, that was sort of just like the quick, just to get that fan base, give them something, like, they wanted blood, they got it. And it's sort of just like the Roman days where it's just like, these are gladiators, thirsting for blood. So I think Trump went to appease that base. I think that he knew in the long term it would be shot down by the courts, because there was no legal standing for any of the language that he had proposed. But you gave the time courts, and again, we talk about stacking these courts in your favor. You get the language right, you get it lawyered up, you give these judges something presentable. It doesn't seem on its initial phase that it's not really about the Muslim ban. It's really about national interests in United States territorial situations. So it's really about establishing and maintaining this American international and global dominance. So it's just like, unfortunately, several questions has to be asked. 'Cause a lot of these countries that are named in this, it's just like they're pulling them out of thin air. It's just like it's really outside of economic. We may not agree with the governments that are in power, and I think a lot of that might be a secondary conversation, but I think a lot of that stems from this. Also, countries that we can't just wand our empirical hand over and be like, all right, this is, you guys are going to play by America's rules. So that's how these countries somehow ended up on this list. It's not by chance. A lot of them are Muslim dominated. I don't understand how Saudi Arabia, a country who is actually, the world is convinced that they were behind the terror attacks here.
State-sponsored terrorists. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, they get a,
Well, they get a pass because Donald Trump's friends live there, and he gets a lot of money from the oil that's there. But, look, it was extremely disappointing. I thought for sure the court was going to strike this down based on religious animus, but essentially what they said was, all those things Donald Trump said on the campaign trail, that was just talk for campaigning. And, we're not going to take that into account as evidence because, that's not like evidence on the record anywhere.
Right. No, and just to talk about the laborers, just to switch gears a little bit, because we do need to talk about that too. Like, I think what's most disheartening is like you have a lot of black workers who are protected by unions, like, especially those who are disenfranchised. Like, this is a hard blow because if we start, and there's already been attacks on unions, don't get me wrong, but like now that we're like actively defunding them, I'm really concerned on how unions are going to be able to survive in this political climate.
Right. And, people forget that unions are the reason why you have a weekend. Unions are the reason why you have a 40-hour work week. Unions are the reason why you get a lunch break. There's a lot of things that we get that even if you're not in a union, because of unions. So, unions are really, really important.
But I've heard on the flip side, people say, like, when unions were really working to get, like, weekends passed and, like, 8-hour work days, that was, like, a century ago. How and why are they even still needed? And I wanted to throw that to Ed.
Okay. Do we have time to take this?
Yes, we do.
Okay, cool. Okay, cool. So yes, as you mentioned, unions are responsible for pretty much the living wage that we have, which I also try to get to people to stop saying the working wage and actually a living wage, because it's like we actually, there's a difference. Unions, because of the idea of collective bargaining, this is why we're able to get your $37 an hour, depending on what trade union you're a part of. And for the last century, and for as long as capitalists and these corporate overlords have been owning and operating the facilities, they've been trying to union bust. It's just like there's been union busting going on in this country, at least definitely over the last 25 years. We saw a corporate takeover or a government takeover of GM down in Detroit. We've seen even this attack on public school unions and the different municipalities, even in our own New York City. Across, I think it was last summer, we had Wisconsin teachers going on strike. and it goes on and on. But the idea is that you sort of create this environment where it's just like people who don't pay into the fee. They sort of treat the unions like they give the old mafia say. It's like, oh, you're paying for protection and you're paying for longevity. But the truth is that you need these things. Without these things, it's like you're pretty much a slave to whatever your industrial warlord or corporate overlord says that you're getting. If you have to,
you're not a fan of corporatism, are you?
If you have to compete with, with global prices, and if they're going to pay this Indian farmer $1 and you have to compete with that, you have no union protection. It's just like your job is eventually going to get shipped overseas to save that company just even a dime.
Absolutely. So and I know we do have to switch gears before we go on break. I want to talk about the Justice for Junior movement. The fatal Bronx stabbing and victim of a young man who literally wanted to be a cop and was killed by gang members. And then, if you watch the video, he was not helped. Afterward, it looked like the police dropped the ball. It looked like the people who were in a bodega and could have helped him, they dropped the ball. And now we have this young, 15-year-old who was dead. And, I mean, it's just so disheartening. We haven't had time to really talk about it here. But I know that especially here in, Uptown and the Bronx, right. We feel it because this is like home to us.
Right. No, I mean, look, I think it's terrible. And I'm glad that people are coming out asking for justice. I know that a lot of people in the Bronx, like Cardi B and some of the Yankees, have donated some money. But I know we have to go to break. I wanted to make we can't not forget about yesterday. There was a huge marches and huge rallies to end family separation. There was also a federal judge that ruled last week that parents and their kids must be reunited. You should definitely check out some of those pictures and videos that are coming in on Instagram, on Facebook, on Twitter, all over from all the people that were out at the rallies yesterday. Yeah. I was out at a rally. I think 5 hours after the beginning of the rally, there were still people marching over the Brooklyn Bridge.
Absolutely.
And there was people out all over the country. There was a rally in White Plains. There was a rally in D.C. There was a rally in Chicago. And literally everywhere you could think of, people came out into the streets yesterday to protest the Trump policy of family separation. So on that note, we have to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be talking about the future of the Democratic Party. Stay with us.
Power
Thank
to
you.
The people.
And we are back. This is Let Your Voice Be Heard right here on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. Shout out to all of our podcast listeners who are listening to this a day or two after we record it live.
Nice.
We appreciate you guys.
We do.
Absolutely. And shout out to everyone who is watching via Facebook Live. Keep those comments coming, guys. We have a full segment where we're talking about the Democratic Party. I definitely want to know what you guys think. If you guys think that, are you feeling hopeful? Would you vote? Would you go out to the midterm and vote Democrat, for the Democratic Party? Are you believing again,
We're in Harlem. This is the bedrock of Democratic establishment.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Harlem politics are deeply rooted.
Absolutely.
But, I feel like, millennials, especially those of color, have been very disillusioned by the Democratic Party. So, and we're going to talk about that here. No, Ed being one of them. So we had another long, exhausting, and draining week for us on the left. As we mentioned during the news roundup, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of Trump's xenophobic Muslim ban. Unions took a major blow, and then Justice Kennedy decided to retire. Now, these wins, which seem like they were all wins for Trump country, they were disconcerting to say the least. But there was one particular highlight that kept us energized and kept us hopeful, at least for me. And that was the win of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in the New York primary. Now, she's a 28-year-old Latinx woman. She identifies as a democratic socialist, and she comes from a working-class background. She went to Brown University, she interned for Ted Kennedy, and then she worked as both an educator and an organizer. She's been endorsed by Move On, Black Lives Matter, People for Bernie. She and now on her platform, she campaigned for Medicaid for all, a $15 minimum wage, 100% renewable energy by 2035, which is in our lifetimes, free tuition at public colleges,
abolishing ICE.
abolishing ICE and federal jobs for everyone who wanted them. So she had like a pretty
the right to work.
Intensely progressive, left-leaning, almost some would say radical platform, and she won on that. Whereas,
I mean, I don't think it was that radical, to be honest.
To be,
some would say
we'll get into that. Continue. We don't want to cut you off. Go ahead.
No, it's all good. But it's a lot of excitement here, even with us in the room, because again, she's relatable. Like, she's a millennial. She's born in '89. Like, she speaks our language. Like, like even watching her campaign or watching some of her earlier interviews, like, she kind of gave you that Jenny from the block feel. Like, she can relate to me. She knows the struggle type.
I'll say before we dig into this analysis, I did like the Instagram post she had. She posted the soles of her sneakers from campaigning, and you can see from pavement, it's just like, it was
she hit the ground running.
Right.
Absolutely. She did a hardcore grassroots campaign, and on top of that, she only spent $300,000 for the majority of her campaign up until the tail end when she experienced a surge in small donations. Her opponent, incumbent Joe Crowley, spent $3 million to secure his seat in the House, and he took money from lobbyists. So that's a 10-to-1 difference, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, he had the money, but she had the people. And at the end of the day, he just relied on the fact that the people he thought were going to come out to vote for him are the same people that have always come out and vote for him. What her campaign did that was different was they went out and they knocked on doors. They registered Democrats. They registered people to become Democrats that were never Democrats before. They turned out a whole new group of voters. They specifically targeted a lot of young people that have moved into the district. They obviously targeted, young Black and Latino people as well. They knocked on a ton more doors. They got outspent, but Crowley got outworked is what it comes down to. And she told the people what she stood for, not just what she was going to stand against. This is the biggest problem the Democrats have.
It's messaging.
Yeah.
And we definitely need to pinpoint messaging. And on top of that, so Joe Crowley, he was actually a 14-year incumbent positioned to become the Speaker of the House if the House ever becomes Democrat. And that's basically why this election upset sent shockwaves through the entire nation. So her primary win makes her a shoo-in for Congress in New York's 14th district, and it sent a critical message to the Democratic Party, which is what we are going to discuss now. But before we do, I want to open up the discussion to the panel by asking for your initial reactions to Alexandria's win. Alyssa?
I was really happy. I literally, I got home and I was out at a bar having a few drinks, and I ran home to get the results as I knew the polls were closing at 9. And I started on my way home checking the New York Times primary page, and I see that she's really far ahead. Of course, I don't like to get ahead of myself because of what happened in 2016. Because when the polls first closed in November of 2016, Hillary was ahead also. Right. So as they say, don't count your chickens until they hatch. But at some point, I realized that she was just so far ahead that he was never going to catch her. And then I crazy started calling Stanley actually because he wasn't answering the phone, and I kept calling him, and he still wasn't picking up. But he was posting on Facebook, and I was like, Stanley, call me, because I was totally freaking out. And then I just started texting everybody I knew, oh my God, holy ish, I can't believe this is happening. And then at some point, AP called it, and I just was jumping up and down. And this wasn't even my district, but I was just so excited because it was it just felt like something.
Yeah.
What it was representing, it felt so good after all the losing that's been happening. It just felt good to win. I texted somebody and said I felt like it was November of 2008. That's how good it felt.
It really did. Now, Ed, you've met Alexandria personally. Did you think she had a shot of winning?
I did not. Unfortunately, I tend to feel that the Democratic establishment has bought and paid for the next umpteen years, and I think what this spoke to was that we got one Wall Street Democrat off the books, and I thought through grassroots organizing, I thought through the platforms that she ran on, it really resonated with the younger crowd. She got a lot of these first time 18-year-old voters to see where she was coming from. It's you guys are going to go to college, and then what? You're going to accrue massive debt. So to curtail a lot of that, I think she ran on a populist platform that is easily obtainable. I think that it's easily digestible to a lot of people who are fresh onto the political scene. I think for long term, people who have been Democrat and voting for the establishment, they saw this as you guys have been doing close to nothing in Congress for the last umpteen years, and we want you guys out.
Yeah, but before we get too excited, we actually have a comment via Facebook Live. Alberto, he points out something that, makes a lot of sense. So he says, we still have Pelosi and her crew of older cronies yapping about Trump instead of doing nothing. By the way, she blocked me on Twitter for saying she does nothing. I kept telling her to do your job, and that's no to yap hate of everyone else. So no, Alberto, good point. The Democratic Party is still run by Nancy Pelosi and a bunch of older Democratic folks that do a lot of talking, and according to Alberto, they don't do anything else.
Right. No, I mean, look, this goes to the point that I was trying to make before, which is Democrats need to be telling people what they're going to do for them, not just how they're going to be against Trump. Now, one thing to your point, which is this is why you should be part of a party. Because if Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez had run as a Democratic Socialist on the DSA line and not as a Democrat, then Joe Crowley would have won that primary. And then there might have been a three-way general election that she would have lost. And so this is why I tell people all the time, don't leave the Democratic Party, change the Democratic Party in your image. Make the Democratic Party into what you think it should be, and especially for young progressive millennials and young progressive millennials of color or those that are queer, like the Democratic Party can be what you want it to be. You don't have to leave the party. You can shape the party.
Ed, before I give you a chance to respond to that, because honestly, we're speaking directly to you, I just want to correct myself. The person
not just to him.
Well, he could speak for all of those independents and Democratic Socialists. I want to correct myself. So the person who gave that comment, his name is Albert. Now, go ahead, Ed. What do you say to that?
I say yes. I say unfortunately for far too long we've been operating in this duopoly of Republican versus Democrat, and I see a lot of their interests aligning, being the same. Again, there are factions now that we're seeing. Some of these Democratic Socialists of America, we're seeing a lot more independent people who are actually like independent and not beholden again to the Wall Street oligarchs. But I think that we need to really create a legit third party. And I do not I understand it. It may not be feasible with the numbers, and it may not be feasible due to just all the regulations, the rules and regulations that go with establishing a third party and getting all these votes. But it's just like if we continue to play by the rules of Republican or Democrat, our interests, I don't know if our interests will ever make it to 1600 Pennsylvania, if that is our, true
that
goal.
depends about, whether or not this young progressive millennial movement takes over the Democratic Party. But I will say this, there's an impediment that most people don't think about. We will never have a third party system unless we repeal the 12th Amendment. The 12th Amendment basically says that we have a two-party system. People don't realize that. I've discussed this in terms of the election. I'll go over it really quickly, and then I know we have to move on to the next point, which is the 12th Amendment says that if a person running for president does not get 270 electoral college votes, then the House picks the president. So if you have three parties and each one of those presidential candidates picks up a few electoral college votes for a few states, that will create a situation where no candidate will ever get to 270, and so you'll always have the Congress picking the president, which is anti-democratic. So I always tell people, before you advocate for us to have a third-party system, you first have to be talking about repealing the 12th Amendment. Otherwise, it's just never going to work. But moving on.
Yeah, moving on to that. So, that brings us to the next question is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's win a referendum on the Democratic Party? Are young progressives speaking out and saying, you know what, we're going to start making changes from the inside out, Ed?
I'll say yes, and I'll offer you a few other just look at other races that were happening in the city. In my own district, you had Yvette Clarke, who was a long-term Democrat. She retained her seat, but only by 1,000 votes. Yep. She had a young Ugandan young man who ran again on a pretty much a similar platform that Miss Cortez won, and he got a lot of the Caribbean American votes in Flatbush. He got a lot of surprisingly enough, he got a lot of the young white college voters who who live in these neighborhoods, because they're essentially facing the same issues of housing, the same issues of guaranteed work. And so I think, again, we're all speaking to a larger struggle, which is the struggle to maintain a basic living wage. And I think a lot of these young politicians, they get it, and they're speaking to that because they've gone through that struggle. They're all burdened with student loan debt. The country, of course, is burdened with student loan debt. I think $1.3 trillion or something like this. At this point, it was higher than the housing crisis of 2008.
Yep.
So these are all. I think again, the do nothing Democrats, had they been doing something, maybe their power would not be eroding like it is. Well, I shouldn't say eroding, but a dent in the armor.
Yeah, no, you know what? A lot of corporate Democrats and a lot of the establishment, they're really feeling scared, and I think they should. But on that note, we do have to take a quick break. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, we're going to talk about the future of the Democratic Party and if it could really be a party for us, young, diverse progressives. This is Let Your Voice Be Heard.
Look how I'm living now. Police be tripping now. Yeah, this is America. Guns in my area. I got the strap.
This is America.
What a great song.
I mean, shout out to Childish Gambino. Like, that song
that
is...
video.
You know, it took me a really long
everything.
time to figure out that Donald Glover and Childish Gambino was the same person.
Okay, Cardi B. You and Cardi B had the same
Yay,
problem,
Cardi.
okay? Because Cardi B couldn't
Cardi.
tell that they were the same person either.
I'm gonna go party with Cardi.
Yes,
when
literally.
after she has the baby.
After, yes.
Hit me up, Cardi. Let's chill.
I'm not sure that will ever happen.
Probably
but,
not.
But we are back. This is Let Your Voice Be Heard right here on WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. Shout out to our podcast listeners and shout out to all you guys on Facebook Live. We appreciate the
Thanks for
love,
tuning in.
the comments, and everything. Yeah, the reaction. We love the engagement. So before we went to break,
Like, we heart you.
yeah, no, seriously. Like, we seriously appreciate you guys. Like, this is a show for us, the platform where we all let our voices be heard. So before we went on break, we were talking about like the fraction of the Democratic Party, right? And if it's finally shifting more to the left, where are the needs of people like us would be represented. Now, the question I have now for all you guys is the left having a Tea Party moment? And the reason I'm asking that question is because back in circa 2008, 2009, the emergence and election of Barack Obama triggered a knee-jerk response on the right, and far-right Republicans and conservatives coalesced around extreme nationalistic views that were racist, anti-immigrant, xenophobic, etc. Now, and although a large population of these people have always existed in America, it was like they formed this successful coalition that managed to unseat moderate, like reasonably thinking Republicans and get their type of candidates elected. There were a number of Tea Party candidates that are working in Congress right now. So in comparison, Ilyssa, would you say we're doing the same thing?
I would say yes and no. I mean, look, there's a lot of similarities between what's going on right now on the left and what happened in 2010 during the Tea Party movement, but there are also a lot of differences. And I actually, we were having this conversation through a group chat between me and Selena and Stanley and Jackie, who isn't here today, and we were sort of pointing out that, there are similarities and differences. Like, for example, there was a big knee-jerk reaction, as you pointed out, to Barack Obama. That sort of kicked off the Tea Party moment. A lot of people on the right felt like the country was going too far left and too far in a different direction. There was also a fair amount of racism that came into play within it, and xenophobia, as you also pointed out, which, and it was this gut reaction, and it sort of culminated in, and the example I use is the Eric Cantor. Eric Cantor is literally Joe Crowley. He got unseated by a guy named David Bratt. I made that point on Thursday, the night that Tuesday night when she won the election, when Ocasio-Cortez won the election, through a text message, and literally 10 minutes after that, the New York Times published an article using that exact example. So yay for being.
Did you tip off the Times,
I guess
Ilyssa?
so. Yay for being on topic. And so that's very much what you're seeing, which is now you have the left, which is due to the election of Donald Trump. You have a lot of people on the left that are pushing back. So you have this rising liberal movement. I think the biggest difference is racism, the interjection of racism. I think there's a lot of, economic anxieties in both situations. I think that people really want something different in both situations. I think in both situations, people want to get rid of the establishment and get rid of people who have been in Congress for a long time in favor of somebody who is giving them a new platform and something fresh. But I think that the biggest difference between the movement on the left you're seeing now and the movement you saw in 2010 in the right is the movement on the left does not have the interjection of racism in the way the movement movement on the right did.
And now that we are moving to the left, I kind of want to throw a devil's advocate type question out there, because this push further left can actually have a disastrous effect for Democrats in the long run. Should Dems be concerned about going too far left? Could this lead to more extremism and more voter alienation? A lot of folks in Middle America, Ed, they don't relate. They see immigration as an issue, even though they're Democrat. What do you think?
I think that they've been following the national narrative for too long. I think that any time that you can successfully get people wholeheartedly to agree that $15 for a McDonald's worker is too much, when you extrapolate that over the course of a year, it's probably $30,000. And I think if we can all agree that $30,000, you're not balling out of control living in New York, living in any of the main cities. But I think that again, shaping the narrative, I think it's very interesting that it seems to me, and I haven't traveled to all the 50 states, but outside of your traditional New York and California, everything else is sort of middle America. There's still these are still very Nixon Republicans. This is obviously not the Democratic Party of Lincoln, but it's they're holding very close to whatever this America First thing that's happening. I think again, it's about austerity. It's about union busting. It's about sort of from the top down suppressing as much wages as you possibly can. And unfortunately, it seems that some of the same people that wanted to change that they voted for Barack for. They voted for Trump for that same change. You're talking about drain the swamp, and it's
right. I mean, look, I do.
Can we risk going too far left?
Yeah, look, it depends. It depends on where you are. Not every candidate is going to work for every single place. Somebody who can win here in New York 14 by running on a very left platform may not be the same candidate that you want to run to potentially win back a seat in a place like Iowa. Maybe it is. I think for too long that Democrats have tread this middle ground, this centrist ground, when in reality, it's the progressive politics that wins. Medicaid for all is a winning policy.
Right.
$15 wage for as a minimum wage, when the living wage, if you account for inflation, should be $21 an hour, is a winning policy. I think leftist policies do win in the majority of places. And I think a lot of people have said the reason why Hillary Clinton did not win in 2016 is because she did not run far enough to the left. She did not show up in Michigan and talk about economic security. She did not show up in Minnesota. She did not show up in Pennsylvania. Trump spoke to those people. And so a lot of people have said that Bernie Sanders leftist platform works. And I think that they're right. And I think that we should run to the left. But I think there also is a limit where you don't want to go way, way, way too far from the left. I mean, you don't want to get in a situation where you're now arguing that the government should take over the means of production for everything and we should do something like...
Well, we're not talking about a totalitarian...
No, we're not. But some people on the left are, and maybe that's a very, very small group. Right. But I think we do not want to go that far, but I would disagree that this platform that Ocasio-Cortez ran on is too far. I think this should be the mainstream platform for Democrats.
I would say we should... It's a foundational piece. I think that there's room for us to slide a little more to the left.
Oh, so, okay, Radical. Hold that thought, Ed. We have another comment that I wanted to get to. So Albert says, what about funding for politicians and term limits? With Cortez winning, we kind of cut the term limit. LOL. These politicians are into it for their careers and above all legacies. They talk a lot about that. Yeah, I would tend to agree too about career politicians and the fact that they're there to solidify their legacy and to get a paycheck.
Well, I just want to harp back on the point I was talking about Yvette Clarke, and I mentioned this because she's not only been running my district for decades, but her mother ran the district pretty much before she did. So it's just like, obviously it wasn't passed on to her because you have to be voted in. But yes, it's this whole thing about political legacies. And to be honest with you, she hasn't passed much legislation. Like, she's voted obviously the correct way on healthcare and just like funding for public education. But outside of that, there hasn't been any hardcore radical upset, and redistribution of any type of state resources.
Okay, socialist, and that's what you want. But no, I'm just kidding with you, Ed. But no, I do.
Yes. At some point, it's just like we have to start looking at making transportation in this city as a service and not sort of a profit line.
So you want a candidate that says free public
MTA? Absolutely.
Okay. Well,
we can pay for a tax Wall Street.
Well,
I agree with that.
Free public. Okay,
I've
so we want
long
free everything.
advocated for, people use the term free. Nothing is free. It has to get paid for some way. The question is who's going to pay for
Wall
it.
Street.
If you want, look, I wouldn't mind my taxes going up an additional $50 a month, but all the public transportation is free. That would be less than what I'm paying right now. It's the same thing when it comes to health care. When you break down what Medicare for All is and how it works, and you say, look, your taxes are going to go up, but you're not going to be paying a premium anymore, and you don't have to pay a deductible, and your copays are going to go down. And people, like, the light bulb goes off, and they go, oh, wait, you mean it's going to be cheaper even though my taxes are going to go up?
Right.
So we have to meet people where we are, but we have to explain how the policies actually work, and we have to explain how it's going to get paid for.
Yeah.
All right, guys, so we do have to start to bring this conversation to a close, but based on the primary outcomes, what do you think, or what do you predict will happen during both the midterm election and in 2020? You have about 30 seconds.
I think that there's going to be a blue wave coming, but only if people are not complacent. When I say not complacent, that means you have to show up. It means you have to show up for your candidates, whether that's collecting petition signatures, whether that's going out to vote. It also means you might have to register with the party so that you have a say in who that person is, so that maybe it's not the establishment candidate that's running in the general because you've helped elect somebody more progressive during that primary election. There's so much that can be done, but it's not going to happen if people stay home. And you know what? That also is something that the Democratic Party needs to think about when the DCCC decides who they're going to back. And they need to think about whether or not they're going to start throwing money towards more young progressive people of color, queer people that want to get involved and run for politics, because they can't keep backing the status quo. If they keep backing the status quo, they're going to keep losing. So there's a responsibility that both we as individuals has, but also the Democratic Party as a whole has. And if those two pieces lock into line together, I think we can win in 2018. I think we can beat Donald Trump into 2020, but it's not going to happen if people stay home.
Absolutely. I think you summed it up perfectly. I would just have to say that I do not know if the Cortezes will ever get to that national stage if the Democratic Party continues to back I have nothing against Bernie Sanders, but these 45-year incumbents who are still pushing the same agendas. And of course, I agree with many of what Bernie has to say. I agree with a lot of what Elizabeth Warren. I would hope that these two can sort of coalesce or come to an agreement of some sort where they won't outdo each other. Maybe they'll come together. I think that they're the closest to something I'd like to see at a 2020 ticket.
Quickly, what can we do? What should we all be doing to elect more diverse candidates to office come 2020 and come the end of this year?
Support people. Support people with your money. If you don't have the money, support people with your time. If you have a good platform and you want to run on your own. And I hate to say it, obviously, as much as I want to have young, progressive people running for office, if it comes down to it and the person who's on the top of the ticket for the Democrat isn't necessarily the person you wanted there, but the alternative is the Republican, that's much worse, bite the bullet. And I know that's hard for some people to hear, and I know that's not what a lot of people want to do, but look, if more people would have bit the bullet in certain situations, then we might not have been in the situation we're in now. So no, I'm not calling anybody out specifically. I'm just saying, politics is not a spectator sport, and sometimes
you got to jump in.
Sometimes you got to jump in, and sometimes that jumping in means you have to compromise. And I'm not saying compromise completely from your ideals, but think about things strategically is all I'm getting at.
Ed, quickly in 20 seconds.
People got to vote. You got to go out, vote with your vote with your feet. Show up, volunteer. Do not believe the mainstream hype. Really, people need to be going out to these civic engagements, whether it's your town hall, your local town halls. Get involved on a very local level, like your community district leader. These are the people who get your vote, who get your judges on. So you're not doing 20 years for marijuana. These are the people that vote and swear in these judges. So you need to be on your local, much more engaged, civically engaged.
Absolutely. And I just want to end with this, guys. So Alexandria represents a new wave in progressive politics. And for many of us, she gave us hope, not just for the Democratic Party, but for the nation. She's inspiring, and she proves that we can take back our nation. We can make it fair, just, and welcoming to all. And that's the principle of America. That's what we say we're supposed to stand for. And with people like her and with people like Ed, Ilyssa, and you guys watching, we can actually make the changes that need to be done. And besides Alexandria, there's a lot going on across the nation. I wanted to mention the race in Massachusetts. the 7th District, where we have Ayanna Presley. She is a 44-year-old official who became the first black woman to serve on the Boston City Council. She is challenging Rep. Michael Capion, who is a 66-year-old 10-term incumbent. Again, she has a chance to take him down. The Democratic Party is no longer a party just for old white guys. It's our party. And if we get involved, if we vote, if we canvass, if we campaign, then we can definitely take it back. On that note, I want to say thank you to everyone who listened, everyone who left comments via Facebook Live. We appreciate you guys, and continue to support Let Your Voice Be Heard on our Patreon account. That's patreon.com/BeHeardRadio. If you leave a donation, you can support us, and we'll continue to support the issues that matter to you.